Good day, grade 9 science students. Today what we're learning about is atomic structure. Now, to talk about atomic structure, what we really need to do is talk about matter. Matter is anything that has mass and takes up space. Recall for a second, how can we classify matter? Two main groups, pure substances and mixtures. And we can classify both of those things further down into two other things. So mixtures, for example, can be homogeneous, which means one phase, so like salt water, for example, or heterogeneous, which is like oil and water. You can clearly see the difference between those mixtures. So mixtures are mixtures of different things. Pure things are made of just one type of particle. Now those particles can either be atoms or they can be molecules. And if they are atoms, that means, if they are just made up of one type of particle, you are an element. Okay? Or if you have more than one element combined in specific ratios specific ratios, you are a compound. Okay? Sorry for those lines there. Elements are single things that are found on the periodic table. Compounds are also found on the periodic table, but they're combinations. So for example, if we said H2O, that is a compound. It's made up of two hydrogens and one oxygen. So we really need to know a little bit about the periodic table before we can learn about atoms, because elements are really, if the simplest element that you can have are atoms. Okay, so let's look at that. Here's the periodic table. We're going to look at this several times throughout the lessons, and each one of these represents a different type of atom. Now these atoms on the periodic table below me, all these guys around here, they all have different sizes, and they're all made of the same type of things. We call them subatomic particles. Now, subatomic particles make up atoms. So atoms have three main components or subatomic particles. And the first one is we're going to call neutrons, which they have no charge. They're found in something known as the nucleus, which is the center of the atom, and they have a mass of 1. We say a mass of 1 just because it's a generalized term. It's not anything you can easily use yet in science, but just remember it being 1. So if we look at our atom, we have a neutron in the middle of that atom in the nucleus, which is right in the center. So the nucleus is right here. Okay? And we have protons, which are also in the middle, but they have a positive charge. Okay, so they're exactly like a neutron. They're found in the middle. They have a mass of 1, 2. So, but they have a positive charge. Now, if you look at this, you got two green spheres and you got two red spheres. The green spheres are neutrons. The red spheres are protons. You see how you have 4 of them? Each one weighs 1, so therefore the mass of this nuclei or nucleus is 4. Okay? Now, there's one more ingredient to an atom, and that is the electron. The electrons are negatively charged, very small, very, very, very small subatomic particles, and they fly around the outside of the atom, and they have no mass at all, but they have what we call a negative charge. So when you think about an atom, you have a nucleus in the center. It's got a positive charge from the protons. It's got its neutrons in there. It's got all its mass is in the middle there, and then the electrons are flying around on the outside, and they have really no mass at all, but it's a negative charge. So when you put your hands together, do it like me here, what's actually hitting is your electrons are hitting each other. So the electrons in my one hand are hitting the electrons in the other hand, and they're both negative charges here. So we might learn this later in science, but my hands are actually not even touching because negative and negative actually repel each other, which we're going to learn in physics this year. And they actually push on each other, and they're actually not touching at all. So what makes up an atom? 3 things: protons, electrons, and neutrons. You need to have this memorized, so make sure you write this down and make sure you know it. So when we look at the periodic table, there's a whole bunch of different elements here, and each one of these elements represents a different atom. And each atom has a different amount of protons, for sure. Okay, so each element has a different amount of protons, but they also have varying amounts of electrons and neutrons that make them the atom that they are. For example, hydrogen atom will not have the same amount, hydrogen's up here, will not have the same amount of protons as a helium. We're going to learn that hydrogen actually has 1 proton and helium actually has 2 protons. And if you look at zirconium, the Zr way down here, it actually, you're going to have to memorize some of these guys. It has 40 protons. So how can you determine how many protons, neutrons, and electron an atom or an element has? Well, what we have to do is we actually have to look at the periodic table again. And the periodic table we're going to learn has 2 numbers. The smaller number at the top is known as the atomic number, and which is always going to be equal to our number of protons. Okay? Now, interestingly enough, when we start drawing atoms, they're all going to have the same positive charge as they do negative charge. So if I've got 4 protons, that means I'm also going to have 4 electrons, because protons are positive and electrons are negative. And that's basically what I've written in this thought bubble here. Now, the atomic mass is the bigger number. Now let's recall, what 2 things give us a mass? Well, the answer is electrons weigh nothing, protons and neutrons weigh 1. So if I weigh 9, okay, that means that mass came from protons and neutrons, and I know I have 4 protons, so that means I need 5 neutrons. In other words, the atomic mass is just equal to the number of protons plus neutrons. So we know that protons is equal to the atomic number, and we know the electrons are equal to that when it's neutral. How do we find the number of neutrons again? Well, you take the atomic number, which is equal to the number of protons, and you know the atomic mass is equal to the number of protons plus the number of neutrons. Therefore, all you have to do is just subtract them. So the number of neutrons is equal to the atomic mass minus the atomic number. And that will give us the answer. So let's try a few. Let's look at the periodic table again. So we look at the magnesium. Magnesium is right here. It's got 2 numbers. The smaller number is the atomic number, which is equal to 12. So if it's equal to 12, that means that I have 12 protons. Okay? That means I got 12 pluses in my atom. It also means that I have 12 electrons as well. Okay? And electrons are negative. So we know we have 12 protons which are positive, and we got 12 electrons which are negative. The atomic mass number here is 24.305. So what we do with that is we round it to the nearest whole number. So it's 0.3, it's less than 0.5, so I round it to 24. So the atomic mass number is 24, and we know that that 24 came from the protons plus the neutrons. So if I have 24 and I have 12 protons, okay, so I'm going to just say 24 equals 12. To find the number of neutrons, you just have to solve for n. In other words, n equals 12. All you have to do is take the atomic mass number and subtract the atomic number, and it tells you the number of neutrons. So again, magnesium would have 12 protons, 12 electrons, and 12 neutrons. Let's try one more. Let's look at aluminum. Aluminum has an atomic number of 13, and it has an atomic mass number of 26.98. In your notes, see if you can find how many protons and electrons and neutrons it has. Okay, so atomic number 13, atomic mass number of 26.98. Step 1 is going to be to round the mass number. Okay, so step 1 is round mass. Okay, so this would round to 27. Not from 26.98 to 27. The number of protons is going to be equal to 13 because that's the atomic number. That means you got 13 pluses. Remember that the protons are in the nucleus. They have a weight of 1, so you'd weigh 13 as well, and you have a 13 plus charge. Electrons are on the outside. They don't weigh anything, and these two numbers will always be the same because it's electrically neutral. So 13 pluses and 13 negatives mean it has no charge at this point, but it has a mass of 13. So if you weigh 27 and you have protons plus neutrons will equal the atomic mass, if you weigh 27 and you've got 13 protons, the question is, what goes in that blank right there? The way you can find is simply subtracting the mass minus the atomic number. You'll get 14. The number of neutrons is going to be 14. And this is how you calculate the answer. Take a look at your periodic table, and we're going to do one more before we go. But that's the end of today's video. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Okay, I added something quickly for you to help you study here. The steps are round atomic mass. Okay, step 1. Step 2, the atomic number is equal to the protons and electrons. Step 3, to find the number of neutrons is found by taking the mass number and subtracting the atomic number, and you get your answer.